So, this will be part two, I guess. But let's backtrack a little bit about your grandparents. So, I don't know the years they were born, but your grandfather would be like 71, I think now. Your grandmother is 69, gonna be 70 this year, I think. Anyways, no, he'd be 74. I don't know, they're like 3 or 4 years apart. Anyways, so your grandmother was born in North Carolina, or actually she was technically born in Alabama, because your great-grandfather was in the military. He served in, he joined during World War II, but it ended before he went anywhere. And then he stuck around for Korea and then Vietnam. He was from Tennessee, freaking country as can be. There's a recording of him somewhere in his like 18 or 19. He sounds like a heck. It's the funniest thing. But throughout his career, he got a huge amount of education and became a very sought after person. He became a chaplain in the military and was actually part of, when he was in the military, he knew a family in, I don't know, maybe Nebraska or something, and they were trying to have a kid and they couldn't do it. It wasn't happening. And so when your grandfather was in the, I think he was in Korea, he drives by this like mud puddle, maybe it was Vietnam, and there's a little girl in the mud that the other kids are picking on, and she was the product of a GI and a Korean or Vietnamese woman. She had blue eyes with Asian features, and basically she was abandoned, and your grandfather got her up out of the mud, cleaned her up, took her back to the base, and contacted his friend in America and said, I think I have a good girl for you to adopt. And that started something called the Hope Adoption Agency. They made a movie about it. It's still going. It helped bring in all these kids from over there that were the product of GIs and women that, you know, whether it was prostitution or rape or whatever, but a lot of that was going on. And your grandfather helped to fix, or at least help a lot of those children, because when they were half American and half Vietnamese or Korean, they were kind of outcast in their society. And so there was all these kids without, you know, moms and dads and bad situations. And yeah, so that was pretty cool. Anyways, well, he was married to your great-grandmother. They had 2 daughters. And I'm not gonna have to take this whole fucking thing. Anyways, they had 2 daughters, and then your great-grandmother got pregnant again with a boy. And I don't know if it was, like she had a blood transfusion. I've never really quite understood, but I think she goes into labor, she starts bleeding. I believe she bled to death, and her and the baby boy died. And so your great-grandfather, your grandmother's like 1 year old at this point. She has no memory of this. And your aunt is like 4. And your grandfather, your great-grandmother offered to take in your grandmother and her sister, which she did. And your grandfather went single now to be in the military for another 20 years. He did end up meeting somebody, and they got married and had kids. So, anyway, so your grandmother was raised by your great-great-grandparents, who was the person that I called my grandmother. Her name was Libby. She was born in 1908. She died when I was 10, I think. But yeah, but that's who raised your grandmother. And so your grandmother grew up with these very conservative, very Christian, went through the Great Depression people. who had already had kids and they were raised, they were grown up, and yeah, so your great-great-grandmother and her husband were now in their 50s. They're raising a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they did this throughout, till my mom, your grandmother, went off to high school, college. That being said, because of this, your grandmother, my mother, by the time she entered the picture with your great-great-grandparents, they had kind of gotten their arguing and petty junk out of the way. By the time they were like 55, they'd probably been married for 30 years or so, 25, whatever. So she grew up in this very calm, conservative, like they didn't have a TV till like your grandmother was like 10, they were just very old-fashioned. Great, wonderful people, wonderful. We'll get to why this is important. So that's your grandmother, my mom's kind of life and childhood. We'll probably bounce back to it as we go. Your grandfather, my dad, he was born into a much, much different situation. He found out, so your grandmother, your great-grandmother, my grandmother, his mother, ended up getting pregnant out of wedlock, which was a big no-no back then, when she was like 18, 19. By this guy who, we'll call him, whatever. It was this guy. Well, this guy also ended up knocking up, I think there was a kid in Germany, he was in World War II, a kid in Germany, a kid in France, my grandmother, your great-grandmother, and then another lady in the town here in North Carolina. Well, the other lady he knocked up was like 15. And so back then, instead of him getting in trouble, the punishment was, you have to get married. You have to marry this woman. So there was no option really to marry my grandmother, your grandfather's mom. So she's still alive at this moment. She's like 90 something. Anyway, so that left your great-grandmother in a bit of a situation. You have a kid. You're not married. Yeah, not good. Very bad. This is, North Carolina in the 50s. So she goes to live with her parents, and she meets this guy. His name was Ed, and he is, I guess, okay with the fact that she has a kid, your grandfather, and they get married. And that's where my last name comes from, is this guy, Ed. It's where your last name comes from. And they, they never told your grandfather, my dad, about this man. The guy that you're calling dad, that's not your biological father. And Ed, who said he was going to be okay with this, turns out he was not. Not really at all. He treated your grandfather, my dad, very, very bad. They had 2 more sons after your grandfather, and he was very mean to your grandfather. He beat him, and beat him, and beat him. And anytime he did anything wrong, he'd say, well, that's just that bad blood in you, which I'll refer to him as my dad, your grandfather, which my dad didn't understand what that really meant. What is he talking about? Bad blood. And he didn't say it to the other 2 boys, his brothers. So this goes on, and when my dad is 15, Ed was a big drinker. He was drunk one day, and he starts screaming at my dad, your grandfather, and bad blood, piece of shit, blah, 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 this and that. And I guess he was drunk enough this day that he makes the comment, well, you're not my son anyways, because you're a whore of a grandmother, or you're a whore of a mother, got knocked out by some other guy. And my dad hears this, your grandfather hears this, and it's like everything makes sense. Like, this is why he treats me this way. This is why, all this stuff. Yeah, I'll give you one example. Apparently, when my dad was, he's like 8 or 9. I mean, he beat him all the time, but one bad story I heard was it was dinner time, they're eating. Your grandfather gets done eating, he doesn't want any more, he pushes his plate. And as he pushes the plate away, Ed takes a knife and puts it through his hand. Just because, like, yeah, this is okay. This is what you're allowed to do, apparently, to your son that you adopted, but really isn't biologically yours. So, needless to say, that kind of stuff. He talked down to him, you're no good, you're worthless. And like, this is definitely part of what drove your grandfather to, I think, pursue a life with like more, opportunities than the ones he was kind of handed. So, anyway, so this day, blah, 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 you're not my son, your mom's a whore, so on and so forth. And yeah, so your grandfather jumps on top of Ed, apparently punches him, beats him up, grabs some stuff, and leaves the house at 15. He now is essentially homeless. I believe he goes to his aunt's, and she takes him in, and he tells her what happened, and she kind of fills in some blanks. That yes, there is this man, yes, he is your actual biological father. Yeah, Ed is telling the truth. And this sets your grandfather off on like a mission. He wants to find this man, and the man lives essentially in the same town. So he finds out the man's name, and the aunt had saved a picture, or his grandmother did. There's a picture of the two of them. The man that is your would be my biological grandfather and your grandmother together. Because apparently after all this happened, my grandmother, your great-grandmother, like burned everything and threw it all out. And this picture was saved. And I have it, and I'll show it to you one day. So he leaves, he goes to live. Okay, so he wants to find this man. Maybe he'll like be the father that your grandfather wanted so bad. And he does find him, and he does meet him. And apparently he says, yeah, man, this is all true. I'm your dad, but I can't bring you home. And your grandfather's like, why? He's like, well, I kind of did. This already happened like a year or so ago. This kid from France or Germany shows up, and it's like, hey, I'm your kid. And it caused some major problems in the family, obviously, and I can't do it again, not this soon. Well, like, just now I'm getting over this. And yeah, so that was it. I think they met at got lunch or something, and your dad, my dad, your grandfather, was just crushed. Like, I'm finally gonna have a family, and turns out you're not. And there is a family, a happy family, filled with happiness and like normalcy. Nobody's drunk all the time, and nobody's beating on you. Nobody's telling you you're worthless and stupid and all these things. It's good. It's what, one would want. And so yeah, it's going on. So your grandfather goes back, goes to school. He gets a job back then. I mean, they may still do this, I don't know. But you could get so because he at 15 had to take care of himself, he would go to school from 8 to 12. He would drive the school bus in the morning. I think they pay something for that. And then he'd get out of school at like 12 to go to work and work all afternoon. I think he worked at a bakery and like a bookbinding place or something. I know at some different points. But yeah, I mean, he's 15, working probably like 15 to 16 now. He's working like 30 some hours a week while going to school, you know, And while processing and dealing with the fact that, okay, I'm no longer really attached to what I thought was my family, and there's another family, and I'm not attached to them either. I'm alone. What a feeling. And I know that feeling, and we'll get to that. So anyways, he goes about his life. Very quick thing, I don't know, like 19 or something, he meets some lady, they get married for a very short amount of time, maybe a year or two, they get divorced. Apparently this is one reason he quit drinking, because he was like drinking one night, he was like thinking about like, I'm gonna kill this bitch, I'm gonna kill her new boyfriend, like that kind of stuff. And apparently that's what he told me one time, or somebody told me, he didn't tell me, that like that's what made him quit drinking. He was like, okay, like I was really plotting this thing out, I probably should not consume alcohol. So anyways, he meets, divorced, 25, meets your grandmother, my mom, and they get married. All right, so back to maybe we'll make that a different video. Yeah.